Evil doesn't always stay in the shadows. Sometimes, it steps into our world. These aren't just ghost stories made to scare children. These are chilling, allegedly true encounters, shared by real people who swear they lived through them. Tonight, we dive into 6 of the most horrific paranormal tales that may forever change the way you see the dark. Story 1. The Bell Witch haunting in the history of American folklore. Few tales carry the sheer, documented menace of the Bell Witch. This isn't a simple ghost story whispered around a campfire. This is the account of a haunting so infamous, so violent, and so widely witnessed that the legend blames it for causing a man's death. Our story starts in 1817, in the quiet community of Adams, Tennessee. The Bell family, led by patriarch John Bell, were respected farmers. Their life was ordinary for the early 19th century frontier. But that ordinary life was about to be taken apart by an unseen and extraordinarily evil force. It started small, as these things often do. John Bell was in his cornfield when he saw a strange animal with the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. He shot at it and it vanished. That evening, the family heard strange beating sounds on the outside walls of their cabin. Night after night, the sounds grew louder. Soon, the noise moved inside. A mess of scratching, gnawing, and the sound of bedposts being chewed. The family was terrified but kept it a secret for nearly a year, hoping it would just go away. Didn't. It got worse. The unseen entity began to focus on the Bell's youngest daughter, Betsy. She was physically assaulted. Her cheeks would flush red as she was slapped by an invisible hand, the sound of the impact echoing through the room. Her hair was pulled, her body pinched and pricked until it was covered in welts. The entity would yank the covers from her bed, leaving her shivering in the cold. Soon, the entity found its voice. It started as a whisper, but grew into a clear, disembodied voice that identified itself as the Witch of Cape Bats. A neighbor John Bell had a financial dispute with. Whether it was truly her spirit or something else using her name, no one knew. But what was certain was its hatred for John Bell. The Bell Witch had 2 main goals: torment Betsy and kill John Bell. Cursed him relentlessly. He began to suffer from a strange affliction of the throat, making it hard to swallow or speak. The witch would mock him, its laughter filling the house as he choked. Word of the haunting got out, and the Bell home became a dark tourist attraction. People flocked to the farm to witness the phenomena. The witch seemed to love the attention. It would chat with visitors, share gossip, and even quote scripture from 2 different sermons being delivered miles apart at the exact same time. This wasn't just a family's delusion. It was a public spectacle. The most famous visitor was allegedly a man who would one day be president, General Andrew Jackson. Hearing about the witch, Jackson gathered some men to investigate. As they neared the farm, their wagon stopped dead, held by an unseen force. Exasperated, Jackson reportedly yelled, "By the Eternal, boys, it is the witch!" A voice shot back from the bushes. "All right, General, let the wagon move on. I will see you again tonight." And just like that, the wagon was free. That night, after one of his men was terrorized by the entity, Jackson and his crew left. He would later say he'd rather fight the entire British Army than face the Bell Witch again. For 3 years, the torment continued. John Bell's health collapsed. On the morning of December 19, 1820, he couldn't be woken up. His son found a strange, smoky black vial in the medicine cabinet. The witch's voice boomed through the house, proudly proclaiming it had given old Jack a big dose of that while he slept. The family tested the liquid on a cat, which died almost instantly. John Bell passed away the next day. The legend says that during his funeral, the witch was heard singing happily. While no medical record proves a supernatural cause, the legend firmly blames the entity, making it one of the only cases in American history where a human death is directly attributed to the actions of a spirit. After its goal was met, the witch's presence faded, promising to return. The horror for the Bell family was over, but the legend had just begun. Story 2. The Enfield Poltergeist. Let's jump forward in time to a modest house in North London in the late 1970s. The story that unfolded at 284 Green Street in Enfield would become one of the most documented and debated poltergeist cases ever. The events were witnessed by over 30 people, including police, journalists, and paranormal investigators, leaving behind photos and audio recordings that are still chilling today. In August 1977, single mother Peggy Hodgson's life turned into a nightmare. It began when her daughters, Janet, 11, and Margaret, 13, complained their beds were shaking. Peggy figured it was just kids being kids. But then, a heavy chest of drawers slid across their bedroom floor by itself, blocking the door. Terrified, she grabbed her 4 children and ran to a neighbor's house. The police were called. A constable, Carolyn Heaps, arrived, likely expecting a simple domestic call. Instead, she documented seeing a large armchair slide several feet across the floor. She checked for wires but found nothing. She later signed an affidavit confirming what she saw. This was no longer just a family story. It had police corroboration. The activity ramped up quickly. Lego bricks and marbles flew through the air, often hot to the touch. Loud knocking erupted from the walls. Furniture was overturned. The chaos seemed to center around young Janet. She was pushed, shoved, and even thrown from her bed. In one of the case's most famous photos, Janet is captured mid-air, seemingly thrown horizontally across her room. The photographer, Graham Morris, has always maintained it was genuine, arguing the room was too dark for her to be simply jumping without hitting a wall. Desperate, Peggy Hodgson contacted the Society for Psychical Research. 2 investigators, Maurice Gross and Guy Lyon Playfair, spent the better part of 2 years documenting the events. They recorded hours of audio, even communicating with the entity through a system of knocks. But the most disturbing evidence came when the entity began to speak through Janet. The young girl would suddenly start talking in a deep, gravelly, masculine voice. The voice identified itself as Bill Wilkins, a man who claimed to have died in the house years prior from a hemorrhage in the armchair downstairs. It was later confirmed that a man named Bill Wilkins had indeed lived and died in the house. However, skeptics point out that the details the voice gave were vague and could have been picked up from neighbors. The voice was often profane and threatening. Of course, many claimed the children were faking it, that Janet was a talented ventriloquist. The sisters even admitted to faking a few minor incidents to see if the investigators would catch them, which they did. But they always insisted that the vast majority of the phenomena, the violent activity, the levitations, the voice of Bill Wilkins, were absolutely real. Could 2 young girls really fool over 30 adults for almost 2 years? The recordings and eyewitness accounts suggest something deeply disturbing happened at 284 Green Street. Story 3. The Indianapolis possession case. It's easy to dismiss modern ghost stories. But in 2012, a case emerged from Gary, Indiana, that was so extreme and so documented by official sources that it shocked people. This story wasn't just told by the family. It was backed by nearly 800 pages of official reports from the Department of Child Services, DCS, police, and hospital staff. This is the story of LaToya Ammons and what the media called the Demon House. In November 2011, LaToya Ammons, her mother Rosa, and her 3 children moved into a small house on Carolina Street. Immediately, things went wrong. Large black flies swarmed their porch in the middle of December. Then came disembodied footsteps and wet boot prints that would appear and vanish on the living room floor. The activity quickly became more sinister. LaToya saw a shadowy figure of a man pacing her living room. Her mother woke up to find a similar figure at her bedside. But the entity or entities seemed focused on the children. Their behavior changed. They spoke in deep, unnatural voices, their eyes bulging. They had violent outbursts with abnormal strength. The youngest boy, just 7, was allegedly thrown across the room by an unseen force. Fearing for the children's safety, the family doctor contacted the Department of Child Services. A DCS case manager named Valerie Washington was assigned. She was understandably skeptical. She visited the home and then took the family to a hospital for an evaluation. It was there, in a small examination room, that the most terrifying event of the ordeal took place. According to the official DCS report filed by Washington, and later supported by nurse Willie Lee Walker, the 9-year-old son, with a weird grin on his face, began to walk backward up the wall. He didn't run or scramble. He walked as if gravity wasn't there. He walked up to the ceiling, then flipped over his grandmother, landing perfectly on his feet. It's a mind-bending account, and while no video exists and some have questioned the consistency of the story over time, it remains an official statement from a state employee and a medical professional who claim they saw the impossible. The police also got involved. Gary Police Captain Charles Austin, a 37-year veteran, was a hardened skeptic. After visiting the home, he became a believer. His audio recorder malfunctioned, capturing a voice whispering, "Hey," when no one was there. He took a photo in the basement that appeared to show a strange, shadowy figure. He and other officers became so unnerved they refused to go to the house at night. A Catholic priest, Father Michael Maginot, was eventually called in. After a thorough investigation, he received permission from the bishop to perform a series of official exorcisms on the family. After the exorcisms and the family moving out of the house, the activity stopped. The house was later purchased by Ghost Adventures host Zach Bagans, who had it demolished in 2016, claiming it was too dangerous to remain standing. The Ammons case is profoundly disturbing because it's not just a ghost story. It's a story detailed in official reports that challenge our understanding of reality. Story 4. The Amityville Horror. When you think of haunted houses, one address probably comes to mind: 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. The story of what happened there is a cultural phenomenon, but behind the Hollywood hype is the allegedly true story of the Lutz family, who claimed that for 28 days, they lived inside a house possessed by evil. The story is built on real-life tragedy. In 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his entire family in the house, later claiming that voices told him to do it. The house sat empty for over a year. In December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz bought the home for a bargain price, fully aware of its grim past. They thought they could make it a happy home again. They were wrong. The day they moved in, a priest came to bless the house. As he sprinkled holy water in an upstairs bedroom, he claimed a deep voice boomed, "Get out!" The room grew cold, and an invisible hand slapped him. He warned the Lutzes to stay out of that room. For the next 28 days, the Lutz family claimed they were under a supernatural siege. Cold spots appeared. Swarms of flies materialized in the dead of winter. Strange, foul odors would waft through the rooms. George Lutz began to change, becoming withdrawn, angry, and obsessed with the fireplace. He woke up every morning at 3:15 a.m., the estimated time of the DeFeo murders. Kathy had vivid nightmares about the killings. Their youngest daughter, Missy, began talking to an imaginary friend she called Jody, a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. The house itself seemed alive. They discovered a small, hidden red room in the basement that wasn't on the blueprints and gave off a feeling of dread. Doors slammed, windows opened and closed, and green slime oozed from the walls. On their 28th and final night, something so horrific happened that the family fled with only the clothes on their backs, leaving everything behind. They never returned. But here's where the Amityville story gets complicated. Skeptics have picked it apart for years. The DeFeo's defense attorney, William Weber, later claimed he and the Lutzes made the whole story up over wine, hoping for a book deal. And while the Lutzes always stuck to their story, even passing polygraph tests, it's important to remember that lie detectors are not considered reliable science. Multiple investigations since have found zero evidence of anything paranormal at 112 Ocean Avenue. Fact or fiction, the Amityville story tapped into a primal fear that the one place you should feel safe, your home, can turn against you. Story 5. The Kennedy Ife Exorcism Death. Not all horror stories involve ghosts. Some of the most terrifying tales are born from the collision of faith, fear, and desperation. The story of Kennedy Ife is a tragic account of how the belief in demonic possession led to a young man's death. not at the hands of a demon, but at the hands of the family who loved him. In August 2016, in North London, Kennedy Ife, a 26-year-old, began showing strange and alarming behavior. He complained of a crawling sensation inside him, which he described as a demon trying to take control. His behavior became erratic and aggressive. His devoutly Christian family became convinced he was possessed. Believing modern medicine couldn't help, they turned to prayer and restraint. For 3 days, Kennedy was held captive in his own home. They bound him to his bed with cable ties and rope, believing they were protecting him and themselves from a demon's violence. This wasn't an act of malice, but a misguided act of love. They prayed over him, performing a homemade exorcism. But medical experts who testified at the trial painted a different picture. They argued that Kennedy was likely suffering from a sudden and severe episode of acute psychosis, and what he desperately needed was medical help, not restraint. After 3 days of the ordeal, Kennedy's body gave out. His brother called for an ambulance, but it was too late. Paramedics found Kennedy unresponsive, still tied to his bed. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest, brought on by the stress of the prolonged restraint. The police investigation found a bag containing hundreds of unused cable ties. The entire family was arrested and charged with manslaughter and false imprisonment. During the trial, the prosecution argued the family had put their misguided religious beliefs before common sense. The defense argued they were acting out of love. In a decision that shocked many, the jury acquitted the entire family of all charges, seemingly accepting that they never intended to harm Kennedy. The story is horrific on multiple levels. There's the terror of what Kennedy was experiencing and the horror of the outcome. A young man dead because his family, in a desperate attempt to save him, chose faith over medicine. Story 6. The Emily Ouija board tragedy. Our final story is a different kind of scary. It isn't backed by police reports or official documents. It's a modern folktale, an urban legend that spreads through the internet, but its warning is just as chilling. This is the alleged story of a young woman named Emily, and how a Ouija board supposedly led to her death. The story goes that Emily, a young woman from Virginia, was shattered by the sudden death of her boyfriend. Desperate to contact him, she turned to a Ouija board. At first, the sessions were comforting. The planchette spelled out messages of love she believed were from him. But soon the tone changed. The loving words were replaced by pleas of loneliness from a cold, dark place. The spirit begged her to join him, saying it was the only way they could be together. The Ouija board was no longer a tool of comfort. It had become an instrument of obsession. Emily withdrew from everyone. She spent all her time locked in her basement with multiple Ouija boards, trying to maintain the connection. Her friends grew worried. She was gaunt, sleep-deprived, and spoke only of her conversations with her boyfriend. Friends who visited her house described a feeling of overwhelming negativity and dread, especially near the basement door. They begged her to stop, but she wouldn't listen. The tragic end to the story is as grim as it is predictable. After not hearing from her for several days, police were called. They made their way to the basement and found Emily dead, having taken her own life. Spread around her on the floor were the Ouija boards, the planchette on one of them reportedly resting on the word goodbye. The story of Emily is a modern cautionary tale about grief and obsession. Skeptics would say this is a tragic story of mental health decline, that Emily's grief created a delusion that led to her death. But for those who believe in the paranormal, it's a stark warning. It suggests that when you open a door to the other side, you can never be sure who or what will answer. And sometimes, the voice that whispers back doesn't just want to talk. It wants to take you with it. So what do we make of all this? From a legendary witch that allegedly killed a man, to a possession so profound it was documented by the state. These stories linger, forcing us to question the boundaries of our own reality. Are they elaborate hoaxes and tragic psychological events? Or are they glimpses into a world that exists just beyond what we can see? What do you think? Have you ever had an experience that defied a rational explanation? A presence in an empty room? A voice with no source? Let us know your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. We read every single one. If you want more explorations into the unexplained, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And if you found this journey into the dark compelling, please give this video a like. It helps us continue to bring these chilling accounts out of the shadows. Thank you for watching. And remember, the next time you hear a strange noise in the night or feel a sudden inexplicable chill, you might not be alone.